States in 99. I was 29 years old. Drew was, I think, 29 as well. And you can see he was always front of the class. I was always in the back. I'm the little head sticking out there with the hair. And I thought, this was 2000 when we went to DC for the millennial celebrations. We were two little boys. And I think when I look back at our pictures, I think we're better looking now than we were then. For some reason, everybody always says I look terrible. I look much older with hair. Thank you. So it's good to have that. Dries and I have been together for 29 years this year. Most marriages have no chance of making it 29 years, but we've been together that long. And I found him at the NRA gun safety rules, pointing at this gun one day and said, "This needs to stop, buddy." And he pointed at me. So I thought, I can get myself a gun if you need to. So we've had some issues through our relationship through these years. It's been a little rocky, but for the most part, we're not trying to kill each other. We still love each other. We dress up a little funny now and then. And this photo, I actually had on my website, or on our website, and the description read, Drew and Conrad, the partners Drew and Conrad has been together with Absolute Dental. And one guy called me one day and he's like, your partner? I'm like, yeah, it's my partner. And somebody said to me, do you know what your partner is? It's your partner. I'm like, no, it's not my partner. So now it says my business partner, Drew. And the picture where I'm kissing him, obviously, that was misleading. So this is our great team, all the guys and girls in gray shirts, really talented people. Drew and I cannot do this, and I know you guys think that Matt makes all the crowns. Matt does not make all the crowns. It's actually me, and then Dries helps a little bit. No, we have a spectacular team of highly talented people right here in the Triangle, and if it wasn't for you guys, we couldn't be here. And then I want to take you back 10, 11 years, the first Absolute Conference. I think Dr. Brent Blaylock and Dr. Larry Howell might have been the only two people today that's still here that went to the first one. We had 8 seats, and you can see the back 2 I cut out because they were empty. So we had 6 people at our first conference. So we've come a long way, and all these people were still hosted in the lab. So thank you for joining us. We always appreciate the support with these conferences. So I like to look where we started with this and then kind of bring it to where we are today. So about 11 years ago, we did this case with UNC with Dr. Lyndon Cooper. He was on his way to China or Japan, and he said, I want to do something. It's called a screw-retained hybrid. And just to think, 10 years ago, we didn't have something like a hybrid. There was no screw-retained. We didn't have angled abutments. It was all UCLA. So we cast this massive substructure, 2 ounces of alloy in there, and that was the weakness. Casting in a dental lab is probably the weakest part of what we do because it's unpredictable. There's much better casting technology today than we had, but it's still the weak link. So if you deliver this bar and something's wrong with the casting, if that breaks, we start all over. Everything I'm going to talk about tonight is about saving time, post-delivery time. Once we've delivered the case and we got paid, both the lab and the doctor, any remake comes out of the bottom line. And that's what we're trying to get out of the clinical environment and make sure that we can help you guys in the lab with that. So we laid some porcelain on that. We did individual crowns and a beautiful case. But if you think, how do you retrieve this when it comes out, when something goes wrong or an implant fails? You literally got to cut all those crowns off. It's not really a retrievable option. So the same as where we see today, some things are just better left where they belong in the past. In this case, it's one of those. So when Facebook came out, you get your little update on your phone. It says you've been tagged on Facebook. So always excited to see what people dig up. So I get tagged on this picture. And I look at it and I'm like, who's these 3 girls in the front? And then I realize, well, I'm the girl in front. So for those of you who thought I was all born like this is by choice. I actually do look like that when I grow my hair out. Maybe 30 years ago, but so, I look at this and I'm thinking, and if you don't believe this was the 80s, my girlfriend behind me, she used to tease those hair up, 2 cans of hairspray. We would go out and you couldn't touch her because it was like touching a pillow. But my brother went with the mullet, and I never went there. So you can give me some credit, although I had the bangs for it, I never went with the casual at the back. So we delivered the case. Everything was beautiful. We did some gold crowns back there. We do still do gold crowns, believe it or not. It's still a great restoration. And I do this meeting up in Rocky Mount, and when I speak in Rocky Mount in those areas with an accent, kind of careful, because you never know how they feel about foreigners in some areas, and very respectful to the clinicians there. And this big clinician from the back walks up. He said, "You did Tiger Woods' teeth." I'm like, "Whoa." And I looked at it, I'm like, "Well, yeah, it does actually look like Tiger Woods." He said, "No, it doesn't look like Tiger Woods." He said, "That little line right there at the top, that's where Ellen nailed him with the 9-iron through the Cadillac window. So that's Tiger Woods. I can honestly tell you we made Tiger Woods' teeth, and I'll just stick with that." So when we look at hybrids, this is one of those technologies that came to market about 9 years ago. And the principle of this was 4 implants to carry an arch. Where I think the evolution has gone is we can now restore either implant level or abutment level. And we'll talk a little bit about the advantages of that tonight. So when we do abutment level restorative options, it brings it to tissue level. So it's a little bit easier clinically to work at that level. But there's some cases where if we can work into the implant level, we save some money, and if we can control the screw access, screw retained options becomes a reality. Up to this point, only posterior crowns were really a predictable restorative option when it came to screw retained. Some of the technologies we have now is making it possible for us to restore 100% of our patients. So this is kind of what we've seen. We've been in this for 9 years now. We see these hybrids come back. I was talking to Dr. Scuria the other day, and we were talking about these hybrids that fail and how they come back and how we have to redo them. And what we realized was it's not just chemical bonding or metal support, but it's also the fact that these hybrids close down over time. So the posterior teeth will wear out, and then we start locking those anteriors in. And once you lock in one of these hybrids and the patients try to go to protrusive, that's when they shear those teeth out. So there's a lot of variables that we're dealing with these type of cases. You don't get good chemical bonding. Matter of fact, you get 0 chemical bonding. You have mediocre metal support, and we have teeth that wears out. Now, it's not the baby out with the bathwater, because we have better teeth, we have better injectable acrylics than we had 9 years ago. So it is still a feasible option, but it's not a 20-year option. And it's always so weird to me when I look at these cases. We would buy a Porsche for $150,000. 36 months later, you're fine with that car not having a warranty anymore. But when we deliver a hybrid for $20,000, patients expect that to last forever. So I think once we deal with this and once we look at the other solutions we have better long-term solutions. And then this is one of the mistakes we made, and I hate to tell you, but we were the ones that made that. We cannot overlap these uppers. The more I talk on hybrids, the more I hear about surgeons who want to stay away from fixed hybrids on the upper because we can't keep them clean. We heard a while back about a prosthodontist in Florida who sold a practice and is now working for an attorney's office that specializes in suing hybrid cases. So it definitely is one of those things that's becoming mainstream because there's thousands of these hybrids out there. I still believe that a hybrid is the premium solution. I think it's giving a patient their teeth back, but we definitely have to take care of hygiene when we do this. And I think that's one of the things where cobalt chrome, we're going to discuss later, helps us to keep that thin. And then being a ceramist, we love to show our work. And when patients pay $20,000 for an upper arch and we put denture teeth in there, it still kind of looks like a denture. So there's some options out there, I think, that can showcase our talent and give a little bit of a better long-term solution. So then zirconia. Zirconia is the big thing. You go to a trade show, everybody's zirconia. There's 2 things, technology and zirconia. And the third thing we hear about now is peri-implantitis. You go to an implant show, everybody's talking about implant failure because of peri-implantitis, because of cement stuck. So the screw retain, I was talking to Dr. Stuart Higgins earlier, and he said, isn't it weird that 15 years ago, screw retain was the main thing? Then we had cat abutments, and screw retained was the dog. And tonight I'm standing here talking screw retained. If you told me 10 years ago I'll stand on a stage and talk screw retained, I would have told you you're crazy. But today we have the options. We were at the World Conference with Dentsply, and one of the speakers said, I can stand in front of you today and say, last year I did 100% screw retained. Lyndon Cooper opened the proceedings, and he said, think about this. We have 17 years worth of data on implants. We know that these screws will fail at some point. We don't know if it's year 25 or year 35 or year 19. I Think about the thousands and thousands of CAD abutments with cementable crowns out there that will loosen at some point. Now, if those were all screw retained, you take the screw out, put a new screw in, and the patient goes home. So it definitely is some value to restoring going forward and have screw retained. So zirconia for us is probably not our favorite restorative option. We do some good work with it, but if you're trying to find something that the human eye doesn't pick up, zirconia is a tough material to work with. And we've got some solutions to this, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. I think the major concern with zirconia obviously is that you do experience some fractures. And if you Google this, the fractures are always around the access holes. This case we fabricated, and you could see the interface wasn't seated 100%. It was seated just by enough, or not seated by just enough, that the little screw grabbed it. We torqued it down to 15 Newton centimeters, and 3 months later, the bar just snapped. So it's very important that these things fit passively, and I think that's where we have some solutions that's a little bit easier to do. So this is a case that showed up at Dr. Jeff and Dr. Hoke's office, Jeff Cunningham's office. Patient was in Durham, high-end patient, and paid $50,000 for this, not at Dr. Hoke and Dr. Cunningham's office. And she said, well, you look great, ma'am. Didn't even take out the blue mousse that was stuck between 8 and 9. And she got home, and her husband said, you look worse than you did with your denture. And I think the problem with zirconia that we're seeing in our industry, a friend of mine always says, you got to follow the money. If you ask yourself something, why is something happening? It's normally because there's money behind it. The reason labs are so prone to switch everything to zirconia is because it's low labor and high margins. And unfortunately, technology is allowing a lot of people that have no business doing these cases to be able to restore them. So we have to be careful not to always just say, we're going to go zirconia because that's the optimal solution, because it's not. And obviously, it depends on who works with this. So this patient Googled zirconia. She's like, I never want to do that again. Dr. Cunningham started the case over, and we were able to put a cobalt chrome in there. So the cobalt chrome gives us the aesthetics we're looking for with the strength that we're doing. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do zirconia. I'm just saying this is a solution that I think we should have in the bag for specific patients. So the three options we basically have: wrapped acrylic over titanium, layered cobalt chrome, and then we had zirconia. Now the big advantage with zirconia is it's monolithic. The drawback with cobalt chrome is that it's layered. So we all know that PFMs work. We've had PFMs since '68, even before. So if the bite's balanced and occlusion is good, we don't have issues with these. Now I always get the question, what happens if one of these cobalt chromes fail? The good thing is we always make a spare denture or a screw-retained denture, a temporary long-term denture, and that. Anything happens, you unscrew it, you put the denture in, you send it back to us, we mill it or we cut it, and we make a restorative crown to go on there. So it's very easy to repair. One of the best and most innovative things I think we've seen in a while is angulated screw access. So the biggest problem with screw retain has always been the screw access hole. When we work in the maxilla, and especially the anterior maxilla, the access is almost always going to fracture that labial arch or that labial surfaces. ASA gives us the ability to recorrect that with a screw head and a screwdriver instead of an actual abutment. Now, what's nice about this is made by Atlantis Superstructures, and it works on almost any implant system you have. So a patient comes in with a Brannemark, or patient comes in with a Nobel, and you've got an Astra next to it, it doesn't matter because the screw head is where the difference takes place. Any system that Atlantis cuts, you can do ASA on. And that's why that little driver that they have a voucher in there for, if you have one of those, it fits in a Zimmer wrench, it fits in a Nobel wrench, it fits in an Astra wrench. So you can truly use what we're going to talk about in any implant. Now you have to be careful, and I'll go back on this slide. You have to be careful when we say you can correct up to 30 degrees. When you have one of these cases, the screw has to come down into the channel and has to turn to go back into the implant. So the more you correct, the more it pushes the metal towards the buccal. So a 30-degree angulation correction is going to need more facial clearance than a 15 or a 20. So it doesn't give our surgeons free rein to put these implants wherever they want, but it does help us in most cases to come back and be able to restore that. So when we do these cases, it's predictable. It really is one of those protocols in our lab that I would say probably the most predictable, easiest deliveries. It truly is one of those cases where we very rarely have issues at delivery because everything is taken care of before we get to the final. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. Where we are in the industry with digital impressions, with Amy and Jennifer helping our clinicians, the technology is there. It really is one of those technologies now that we know we can do modelless crowns off a Triage scan, and they fit probably better than what we see off a model related, because the weakest part in our industry right now is model printing. So the technology, if you've been waiting for technology to get active and to get accurate enough, the time is definitely now. The good thing in the lab is it doesn't matter if you send PVS media or you send it digital, we can do the same thing because we have digitizing scanners in the lab that can take care of this. So take an implant level impression. First appointment comes back, we'll either pour models or we'll print models. So from that point on, we bring it to analog. And what we do is go and keep this simple. So I heard this a little bit, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And I think when we look at how we process this video kind of speaks on sometimes people try to overdo something that by keeping it simple could have been much more. And keep an eye on the secretary on the left side or the receptionist on the left side with the red.
Welcome. My name is Neil Wilson, and I've been personally asked by Todd Peterson, the good-looking guy that owns the company, to give you a tour of everything. There's a lot of information, though, so you got to keep up. Badass segue, right?
And she's still sitting down thinking it's part of the show. So, when I saw this, I thought, what would be cool now is for me to pull a Segway out and go, it's a cool Segway, isn't it? And then crash into the trees there, which I thought, that might be overdoing a little bit. And that's where these cases are. We've learned to keep it simple. Do the protocols the way we know it, and make sure we stay out of trouble by not getting too deep in. So from that point, we make bite trims, we register a bite, midline, incisal edge position, everything we know, face bone, we make a verification jig to help us verify that the model and the impression, or the model in the mouth, is accurate. Then we do a tooth try-in. What's important here is the tooth try-in has to be set up on the crown and bridge model. Once we have that, we basically have a way to transfer what the patient sees and what you saw as the bite. Once the patient signs off on that, we can come back and copy that 100%. So we've never in our industry had the ability to take a study cast out of the patient's mouth and put it back on the model and then be able to make an incisal index and copy that exactly. We could cross-mount, but this is a true cross-mount with what the patient approved. At this point, if we realize this patient is going to come back and say, my mom didn't like the teeth, we'll go ahead and process that little denture as a long-term temporary, give that to the patient, and they can walk with that for 3 or 6 months, make sure that they like it, and then bring it back and go to the final. So by the time we do final delivery, it's very predictable because we've figured out all the issues what the patient wanted. So from that point on, little lab insight, we make a support structure, we make sure that everything lines up. What's important here is to get metal support in the right position. I think for those of you who've done PFMs for the last 30 years, you know PFMs work if they're well supported. You have a PFM crown that's not well supported, it almost always at some point fails. And I think the beauty of Cobalt Chrome is the fact that we can support it so well because we know exactly where the support structure needs to be. And it's all computerized. So from that point on, we put some opaque on there and we layer our porcelain directly to the framework. Now, the advantage of doing something like a Cobalt Chrome is it's the type of material we're used to working. I think our industry has jumped away from PFM so far that we forgot that it is a really feasible solution. So a lot of the things I'm talking about tonight is not just screw retain, but also PFM, porcelain based on an alloy. And you'll see why that's such a versatile case. So this is a case we did with Dr. John Murrell. Patient had this denture for many years, loved the denture, loved the aesthetics, but it was on 6 locator abutments on the upper. And for those of you who have these patients with the locators on the upper, it wears out because they're in undercut. And even though they say locators can go into undercuts, it's not really a very good solution. Locators are non-resilient as well, so they move when the patients function. And these patients think, I'm going to snap this in, it's going to be my real teeth, I'm never going to know it, but it's still a denture. You can see how thin this was, and we didn't really have an option. So we set up a little denture, made sure the patient liked that. I think told her you have to be back in 3 weeks. She showed up 3 years later, upset that it failed, because nobody told her this was just a temporary. Not sure what happened, but that kind of happened, and we were able to copy that. So we went with metal occlusal here. Now, if you think about the biggest drawback with these hybrids is we have limited clearance. We have limited clearance with the patient. Somebody like this cannot go with a zirconia. It just will not hold up long term. Something like cobalt chrome, when we use metal occlusal, we can go 3 millimeters from the ridge to the opposing. As long as we have room to hide our screw head, which means 7 millimeters from the actual implant, then we can put cobalt chrome in there, and we know it will hold up because everything is milled, nothing on this is casted. So you can see we had, I think, 0.9 millimeters. Dr. Murrell did a lot of adjustment to get the bite down. But to show you the accuracy of this, that was the final. We had a lot of porcelain in there. But look what the patient started with. And she was very adamant that that's what she liked. Rounded teeth, everything needed to be in the same position. And you can see how close we came to copying exactly what she had originally. So the delivery is the predictable part. What used to be the scary part on a Monday morning, if you have to deliver a full rehab, has now become almost the easiest part of the process because we know we can copy that denture. So 99, Drew and I show up from South Africa, a box in a suitcase. I had a little hair. He wasn't gray yet. And we get an apartment, so we have no furniture. So we're driving down 40 and we see an IKEA store. We're like, all right, there's our European brothers. We're going to go buy at IKEA. Walk in, there's a couch and a TV and everything we need for this. And I say, yeah, I'll take that. And the guy goes, just drive around back. Your couch and your TV is in a little box, and we'll give you a little descriptive book, a bunch of bolts and nuts. You can build your own TV. We're like, well, this is not going to work. So because it's American, we do things so much better than the Europeans, and I can say that because I'm an ex-European, so I can make fun of my countrymen, is we go to Rooms to Go, where Cindy Crawford and Sofia Vergara build every piece of equipment and what we buy by hand. You walk in there and you take it and you go home. So that's why I love America, because we don't buy or we don't build our own stuff, and we don't need to because we've got these ladies. So kind of what we see with what goes on, some of our friends go on these seminars and they hear about CONUS, and you can put implants anywhere you like because we can correct for 30 degrees. Shallow, facially angulated implants, the hardest ones to restore. Technology is allowing us now, after we've delivered that denture and we know what the patient wants, to be able to put it back in our software, and I can make a phone call and say, this is not going to work. 10 years ago, when we were doing Crown and Bridge and our cousins from across the street were doing removables, I would make a Hader bar, send it across the street, and they would say, there's no room for the teeth. And we would be like, well, we got paid, it's your problem now. Now we do everything with this denture. We look at buccolingual parameters, we look at vertical, so there's no surprises, making sure that when your patient comes next time, we have a solution because we can work that out before. So we did this case, we didn't really have enough in the 30 degrees to bring it back. And what we learned as well is that we can correct facially. Because we can take that implant and correct 30 degrees facial or 30 degrees lingual, if we can't go lingual, we can come facial and try to get it outside the smile line. So we processed the denture, put some composite in there. The patient was pretty happy. We went to the cobalt chrome. She wanted to move the teeth back a little bit, so the axial walls moved and the access holes went up the facial axial walls. So now all of a sudden, we had these two holes right in the facial. Put some composite in there. She was happy until the red wine got stuck in there, and she said, $20,000, not acceptable. So we had no solution for this because we couldn't correct, except go back to abutment level, which adds another $1,000 to this case, 2 or 3 more appointments. So now it becomes a clinical problem that's going to cost this clinician a lot of money. The versatility of cobalt chrome gives us the ability to do what we can do with a wax knife. I remember about a year ago, I walked into Drew's office, and he looked like he was about to shoot himself. And I said, what's going on, buddy? He goes, I just missed my wax knife. Because with the wax knife, A technician could do anything. Now, 2 years later of getting into the digital, we're starting to learn how to do it with a mouse. And that's where we are, and it's a good place because it's predictable technology. So what we did was we were able to correct number 7 into the lingual, but number 10 was right in that position, right between where we could correct. So we corrected it, made a little insert that could go on there, and then was able to make that sit inside the pink tissue. Now the problem with this is, if you ever try to retrieve that screw, there's no way you're going to find it. So we hope geographically that this is a success, and this patient never comes back. So this is one of those cases where a little lingual set screw might have been a good option, a good solution, because that is a permanent fixture right there. It's never coming out because you'll never find it. But it gives us the ability to deal with these things. So most of these cases that we deal with is terminal dentition. Patients have a lot of high expectations. They show up, they don't look that great, but we have the ability now to be working together as a team right from the start. So the days where the case shows up on your desk or in your chair or on my desk and we weren't involved with it is becoming less and less because we have the technology now to help our surgeons to do this right prosthetically from the start. So the one file that's helped us is an STL file. You probably heard the word STL 1,000 times by now. An STL file is basically a JPEG file. So anybody with a computer knows if you have a JPEG picture, anything can open it. If we have an STL file, we can switch it between equipments, between computers. Now we have Steve, who's doing our IT tonight, as a full-time IT guy at the lab. And Drew looked at me like I'm crazy when I said I wanted to hire an IT guy at a dental lab. But everything we do is computer-based now. And if we can learn how to lie to the computers, because some computers don't want to accept other STL files, we can create a lot of things. And that's helped us to give us the ability at Absolute to help you do the things that used to be just for big companies. So we can now be a part of the planning based on where the patient's teeth are, what we're trying to achieve, so we can help our clinicians to guide the surgery. Now, these are the kind of things that we can do as a team. You sit at lunch, you have a sandwich, we connect with TeamView, surgeon, restorative, lab tech, all on there, and we decide where we want to go. Now, this is what we figured out what we can do with these files. Because that plan is an STL file, and we know where the guided surgery is going to be, we can take that file, and I got to give Matt credit on this because he's the guy who came up with this idea. We can now export the DICOM data. So think about that. That's not an impression. That's X-rays that we printed. But the implants are already in place based off the plan. So we can now take this model, we can mount it, and now basically it's normal immediate denture conversion. So we'll make an immediate denture, we cut that back, we're able to give the surgeon all the components preoperatively, so there's no guessing by the time he gets there. We create a bone reduction guide and a surgical guide, and we now have a model in the lab that we can make either a preoperative conversion denture or a straight up denture. Now this used to be the technology that cost $4,000 and you have to send it across the country to be done, where everybody now has the ability, or labs have the ability to do this. So now we make a little matrix in there, and that's the way we deliver the case to the surgeon. So by the time this shows up for the restorative aspect, we know that we've controlled the process from an actual prosthetic point of view and not just surgically. And that's really helped us look at these cases. So the question always beckons, where do we draw the line where we can say the future officially started? And I think this video really speaks well on when the future started.
This video proves to you that the future has arrived. I'm sure you're all now convinced that the future is indeed here, but in all honesty, it had one fucking job.
And for those of you who ever lost a cow, you now know where that cow went. Abducted by a UFO. So the day we don't have to put our own ketchup on our own hot dogs anymore, that's the day of the future. I don't think we're there yet, but we're getting close. Technology is helping us now to combine digital photography with our guided surgery, so we can put this case together from a prosthetic view. So if we have some good pictures on this, Drew can do a digital diagnostic wax up, we can see where we want to end up. When we look at this, we now know when that patient smiles, what is the smile line? Where's the height? Where's that junction between our prosthetics and our gingiva? Everything doesn't have to be guided. I think our industry has gone from freehanding everything to guiding everything back to freehand everything. But I think there's a lot of gray area here where we can help our surgeons, especially with the bone reduction. So if you look at that little device on the left side, we printed a copy of the patient's teeth, but the intaglio surface was the area where we've extracted the teeth. Because we can digitally do a segmentation of the jaw, so if we have DICOM data, we can extract the teeth. We can make those teeth fit back in the patient's mouth after extraction. Now the line you see there is the line we determined off the pictures on how high we want to cut the bone back. So the surgeon can place that on the bone, scour the bone, and then cut it back. So now we have control, even if we don't do a fully guided program that costs $3,000 or $4,000. We can make sure our surgeons know aesthetically what we're looking for and where we want to go. We can do digital dentures. The nice thing now is off DICOM data, we can actually print a denture. We can print a copy of a denture. And some of the exciting stuff that Grant and Amy figured out is if you have a Triage scanner, you can actually scan that denture on the tabletop. We can scan it in the patient's mouth, and the first appointment you get is a tooth try-in because the system will allow us to copy the denture off the digital. So if you want to make a duplicate denture and you scan that denture on the desk and you send that to us, we can print you a duplicate denture. So there's a lot of things we're trying to figure out and a lot of things we're getting to what we can do with this. So it means you never have to use a bite room again to set a bite if the patient has something in their mouth that they like. We can maintain that vertical with one of these scanners. So the technology is really helping us to figure out how to do these things. So that we did an immediate conversion. There was the final with this. And this patient, although she was in her 60s, said, I want to look like Gigi Gabor. She brought us a picture. It was black and white. She said round teeth, smile. I don't know if it was Gigi Gabor. We just copied it. But you can see what we were able to do was create some beauty for her. We were able to lift that aesthetic zone out of the smile line, and she got the kind of teeth that she wanted. Now, this was all doable because we had a denture set up, and we knew what in her mind was what she wanted to look like. And that gives us the ability to create some really true beauty. So I think our senior ceramist, Jan-Soo Kim, is in the crowd here tonight, and I got to give some shout out to him. This guy is a true master. And what he does is always better than the previous one. So Jan-Soo, I'm not sure if you're here, but if you are, we're proud to have you on our team. So getting back to our zirconia, so we figured out, and once again, Matt is brilliant, came up with this idea that we can do a Montreal type bar with our zirconia interfaces. So the weakness with zirconia is that it fractures. The strength with zirconia is that it's monolithic. Now we can layer the anteriors to get good aesthetics with it. But the problem is when you deliver one and it fractures. So what we're doing now in-house is we're creating a titanium substructure, and then we're cementing the cobalt, the zirconia on top of that. So basically we have a hybrid zirconia that you can place in the mouth. If something goes wrong, if you do chip a tooth, you can call us. We can redo the interface, stain it, get it ready. Patient comes back, you take it out, you break it off, you cement a new one, and you put it back in the patient's mouth. Now the post-delivery trauma of a failure becomes very easy to deal with. But because we have the titanium interface, we're not dealing with these fractures that's inherent or becomes a problem with zirconia. So there's our interface before the teeth goes on there. And from that point on, everything is digitally designed. We have a little interface where the tissue touches, and the final result is now a hybrid between zirconia and titanium. So we have the ability now to take the weakness out and not show that metal interface. So everything that goes into the implants are now basically in titanium. So this little video has come a long way with me, and it shows you that sometimes technology helps us from the frying pan into the fire.
This is my new floater by Sherry, and I'm going to show you how it works. First you put it on here, then you press the lock it button, step back, And then it'll fly up in just a second. See? And then,
Oh no!
And if you look closely, Dad was sitting there texting as Flutterby Fairy went straight into the fire. In our industry, we've seen this so many times. You know, Dr. Blaylock is here with the Captech revolution we went through. Dr. Blaylock, I think we redid like 1,000 crowns in a year, it seemed like. But I think technology is now helping us to keep Flutterby Fairy out of the fire. So a lot of these cases we do are obviously not the big ones. We don't do full rehabs on a daily basis. But the technology is extremely relevant when it comes to smaller cases, 3-unit bridges, or quad arches, you know, partially edentulous patients. So if you think about this, if we take 2 CAD abutments or 3 CAD abutments, you have to deliver those individually, then you have to deliver the bridge, then you have to cement the bridge, and then you have to clean the cement. I was chairside the other day with 6 implants with the full rehab we did. And pushing that cement in there, it's basically impossible to get under there and clean those areas. And I realized for the first time what you guys deal with cleaning the cement. So if we can employ this technology in smaller application, we now have the ability to control the screw access, which has been the biggest drawback for us using ASA. And we're using PFM porcelains that gives us excellent aesthetics. So this case was done by Gary Jones down in Fayetteville, one of the more talented or very talented surgeons. If you look at that, implants were placed perfectly. 2 millimeters lingual of the CEJ, 3 millimeters subgingival from the CEJ. So perfect placement, but the access came right through the incisal edges. So up to this point, the only way we could restore that was do correction abutments and then put the frame on top of that. The problem with correction abutments, about $220, and when you bring it that close to the tissue level and you get any type of recession, you expose titanium. So we want to get these interfaces down there. So what we did with this is we set up a little partial. Now this is overkill for a 3-unit bridge, but it shows you if you have a bigger case and you want to make sure the bite's right, and you want to make sure the patient approves the aesthetics, you can place this in the mouth, and back to our original case, you can take that out and tell us at the lab, this is exactly what my patient wants. Now we know your delivery is a flawless delivery because we worked out all the issues in that little partial. We can now set our facial parameters. We make sure that everything is inside those parameters. And where it gives us the ability now, or where technology is helping us, we can jump between the oral setup, the crown and bridge model, and the digital technology very efficiently. So if you look at the top left, that's the design. Bottom right, you can see what the patient had in his mouth, where the metal substructure is going to be. And everything lines up exactly to what we want. Because these frames are now milled out of a solid block of cobalt chrome, a metal try-in is becoming almost obsolete. If you take a good solid impression, implant level, there's really no need to do a metal try-in. It does help to verify the model. Obviously, if you're comfortable with taking implant level impressions, you know one thing, the lab issues or the lab tolerances are not what we had to deal with when we were casting UCLAs. You can see the interfaces as well. Only sits in about the top third of the implant. The problem with internally hexed implants is they get into undercut very quickly. So these bars over 10 implants is almost always going to be an undercut if we engage the hex. So the bridge literally sits in about the top 2 millimeters. So even if you have a lot of implants that off angle, there's always draw. There's almost 90% of the time draw on these. Digital pictures have helped us greatly. And a little side note, incisal edge to incisal edge, we get so many shade pictures where they hold the A3 next to the tooth like this. And what it doesn't help us with is getting the chroma. So if we have a C2 patient and we make a B1 tooth, it's never going to go. Any patient with a gray, natural-looking tooth will notice brightness. If we have a C2 patient and we miss it with a C3 or a C4, and they don't want to deal with it, they're probably going to say, let's go with it. So brightness, aka value, is what we struggle with. So if you have a case and you're not certain what it is, A2, A3, or A4, hold those shade tabs, incisal edge to incisal edge, and it gives us in the lab a reference point on what we're looking for value. Now, there's always an argument, are computer screens color corrected? It doesn't matter because we know what an A3 looks like and we know what that tooth looks like, and we have an A3 tab and we know what the crown looks like. So since we've had this technology, we were able to get about 8 out of 10 crowns that doesn't need a custom staining. Now, Screw Retain gives us the ability to contour the tissue. When we do immediate temps, that tissue will obviously be ready to receive our final. In this case, we went to a different soft tissue melange. We created what the tissue contour is so that we could get 7, 8, and 9 on exactly the same or perfect coronal length. So we cut that out, and we knew off the DICOM data that we had about 3 millimeters of tissue thickness, so I could cut just enough so we could deliver the bridge. So we took it to the mouth. That's day of delivery, and you can tell that we missed that value slightly light. Now look at the A2 shade tab. You can see the A2 is almost perfect, and we had an A2 crown. So when you have a case that you're delivering and the shade is off, this picture is extremely valuable because we can fix the issues by looking at what the crown is and where we need to go. So we stripped all the porcelain off, went back in, and I think the final result was pretty good. But now it helps us to screw that case down. Anything goes wrong, there's no cement cleanup there. You can retrieve it, put new screws in, patient goes home. But yet we have the same aesthetic results, if not better than what we have. So I read this. People who know what they're talking about don't need PowerPoint. And I'm thinking, Steve, seriously? If I'm going to stand here for an hour tonight without PowerPoint, I'd be out the door by now, probably being thrown with eggs. So what I thought was to try something new and get a little white noise and see if I can calm things down and see if what Steve said was actually true. Now, as you'll see, white noise is very calming. So I was told I can't do that because somebody's bound to get a heart attack. So I had to tone things down a little bit. But bottom line is, Steve, you need PowerPoint. As the saying goes, those who teach cannot do. Those who don't have PowerPoint cannot teach. So we're back to PowerPoint. We're going to go on with what we have and why we can use this as a base. So for those of you who have CEREC machines, you know a tie base. A tie base is an interface that allows us to cut a crown on top of an implant. The problem with a tie base is that it's a stock abutment. So it's a very small abutment, and sometimes we need to load a pretty big crown on that interface to make sure we get to occlusion. So cases like this, a tie base is not the right solution. So if you look at a single crown application for something like this, if we take a digital impression, the ability for us now, or the advantage for us, is to take that digital impression, import it straight into our design software, which gives us the ability to design this crown even before your patient gets in the car. It greatly reduces the turnaround times. If you think about a digital impression now, we can deliver a case like this in about 4 days, where we used to wait about 7 days just to get the abutment back, because now we have parallel fabrication. So we put this into our Atlantis software. It gives us an automatic diagnostic wax up. So every case is automatically waxed up, and the support structure is where it needs to be. So from this point on, we have the customer base abutment that goes to Atlantis for milling, and we import that into our 3Shape design software. So before this abutment is actually milled, we're already fabricating our crown. The core file is what is valuable in this parallel workflow of ours. So the abutment is being sent off to Atlantis, the crown is being milled at Absolute. And I hear you asking, how accurate is this? So we have two options. We have a silver titanium and we have a gold U. Now the nice thing with the gold U is it's not gold, so we don't pay the exuberant gold prices. It's a gold nitrate. And Atlantis is, I think, the only company that offers a gold nitrate that actually looks like gold. So it's a great material for us to use under zirconia. So look at this crown. This abutment was milled in Boston by Atlantis the same time the crown was milled at Absolute. We had to extend the margin 90 degrees out of this abutment. That's the first time this abutment and that crown ever met each other. They were made at exactly the same time, and they never saw each other until we pushed the two together. The marginal integrity is absolutely 100% perfect. And that shows us where we are in the industry with the accuracy on something like this. So from this point on, it's easy. You have a screw-retained crown, you deliver it. Now, for those of you who've done screw-retained crowns on internally hexed implants, you'll agree that it's not quite as easy as when we worked on the Brandemark platforms, the external hex, because you could kind of fiddle your way into it. When we work on an internally hexed implant, everything has to line up. So if we have a tight contact, which you never have if you send to Absolute, that will push. That was a good plug, wasn't it, on the side there? Did you notice? So when what happens is the contact will push it and the crown won't seat. So a lot of people think I can just take a screwdriver or my torque wrench and torque it down to 35 and it will seat itself, but it won't. Patient will leave, get in the car, and the crown will loosen because the PDL gave way, and now that interface seats, and now the crown's loose. So it's very important for us to passively seat these crowns. If you have a crown like this that's one piece, now you have a three-dimensional problem. I got to get the conical seal to engage, and I have to get the two contact points perfect without cutting them open. So what this allows us is the ability to do it in two pieces. And this is where the word screw-mentable came from. Screw-mentable is a great idea. It's a cementable crown with the option to retrieve it, so we don't have to worry about cleaning it up. This case we did with Mark Scurria. Patient lost 4 incisors because of overly aggressive ortho treatment. Great teeth to start off with, very tough case for us to copy and do better. Implant placement, we did an immediate temp there, and we were able to create beautiful tissue contour. So this patient was ready to receive a bridge that looked like it was her natural teeth. We took implant level impressions, were able to scan what the patient initially had. Dr. Scurria had pre-op models, so we could put that back in, superimpose it over our implant levels, and we could copy what the patient originally had. So we knew there was no surprises at the end. Designed 2 custom base abutments, and there's our framework. So our framework at this point has got 2 titanium interfaces that slides in. We have a ceramic framework that we can layer our porcelain on. So we're able to layer the porcelain on top of this case. But instead of cementing this in the lab, we send it back as 3 pieces, 2 abutments and the actual frame. So Dr. Scurria went to the mouth with 2 positioning jigs, like we do CAD abutment restorative options. You have a positioning jig that positions it, make sure that everything is in place, and now it's a regular crown and bridge. So we were able to deliver this bridge as a cementable, and there's where the word screw-mentable came from. So we're able to go back in. And this is a day I really had respect, or found new respect, for what you deal with as clinicians. As soon as you put that bridge in the mouth, the patient jumped, screamed, it's hurting, and I was like, that bridge didn't even get close to the tissue. Now, if you think we had a 4-unit bridge with 2 implants, and you had to put it in, screw it down, and as soon as you get halfway, the patient squeals, you had to stop, take it out, adjust it. It takes hours to deliver a case like this. What we were able to do was now put the bridge in, and we realized we were a little bit firm on the tissue pressure on this, and that's where the pain came from. Use some tissue indicating paste. We were able to see where it was, but we can do all the adjustments extraorally. So we didn't have to worry about this patient screwing in, screwing out, screwing in, screwing out. We could put it in, force it down. All the adjustments are done extraorally. Now, I was asked to speak at the peers meeting a while back, and all of the big prosthodontists in the country is there, and I get off stage, and I'm all chuffed with myself because I delivered this case. And Barry Franson walks up to me, and he said, "You shouldn't be allowed to show this in front of this crowd." I'm like, "Oh, what did I do wrong?" And he had a very good point. What we did was we cemented this case on the model instead of cementing it in the mouth and then taking it out and cleaning it up. By cementing this in the mouth, if we had any model discrepancies, you would take care of that variation in the mouth, take it out, clean it, and put it back in. So what we try to do when we deliver a case like this is seat it, cement it, hold it in place, then unscrew it, and take it out, clean it up, and put it back. If there was any discrepancies on the model, it would take care of that delivery. Most cases will cut the hexes out to stay out of undercut. Now you have to be careful. This is not a Dentsply approved way of doing things because this is supposed to be for single application. But as long as Travis doesn't care, I'm going to show you how to do this. What you have to be careful is if you have 2 abutments that's in undercut and the lab doesn't make sure that everything draws, and you cement that in the mouth with an undercut in that abutment, it will never come out. You'll have to cut the bridge in half to remove it. So it's very important that you tell the lab, I'm going to cement this chair side, make sure that it draws as a unit. And we try to really make sure that we don't miss that. So there was our initial case. Patient had some great teeth, temporary, and the final delivery. Now this type of delivery, I think it took us about half an hour, where it would have been at least a 2-hour appointment. So the screw retain is helping us to get a little bit more efficient. So I was talking to this, and I want to give thanks to Dr. Darren Cook, Dr. Aziz, and Sandy from Dr. Scurria's office. I had to call around and find out how do we code for this. So don't quote me as being the authority on this, but this is what I could figure out between these three offices. 56 is a stock abutment. 57 is a custom abutment. And then 58, abutment supported, PFM supported, and code 6065, I think, is the one code that nobody really knows where to use it. Because it's one of those that says implant supported porcelain crown. But if you think about it theoretically, no crown is implant supported. The crown is abutment supported. The abutment is implant supported. So it's one of those codes that I called around a few other offices as well just to see, and nobody knew where to use it. So I don't think people are. So when we do a screw retained crown, it is still a custom abutment with a screw mentable. So if we do a custom base, the one we just showed you, that's considered a custom abutment. So you can still file 57 and 58. When we do a tie base, which is a stock abutment, that's when 56 and 58 is what you file. And then if we do a cobalt chrome one-piece abutment and crown, the abutment is considered custom, and the crown is considered a PFM. So that's where 59 and 57. So that's kind of what I could figure out how people are charging from this, and I think it kind of makes sense. Funnily enough, in the ADA, the 2018 book, I was asking Dr. Aziz as well today, there are no code for screw retained. And you would think that by now they would have something like that. So it's still considered to be a two-piece, although it's cementable, screw mentable. So hopefully that's helpful. So this is my favorite slide. 3 o'clock one Saturday morning, sitting in bed, actually Sunday morning. And you know, sometimes you see a commercial and you think, that is something that I can use. This was one of those commercials where I thought, I can't believe that somebody hasn't thought of this earlier.
You with great looking hair. And ladies with thinning hair or bald spots, GLH solves the problem instantly. GLH is not a paint or a cover-up. It's an amazing powder that clings to the tiniest hairs on your head. It actually builds on itself, leaving you with great.
You know, I've seen the commercial, and I just couldn't believe it. And it really looks
now look
great.
at the last guy. This is why I got
now.
this.
And I tell you, I'm really impressed.
That's incredible.
This
I've been
guy.
getting harassing for being bald. I'm only a young man. No more dates without being called old man, but the babes are back.
Now, if it's 3 o'clock on a Sunday morning and this dude with the mullet can tell me the babes are back, it's a no-brainer. So I went on Amazon, ordered it. You can actually order GLH. Go check it out. You can get it. It's a new improved version. Sprayed it on my hair. Went out one Saturday night. Got home. Next morning, my GLH was on my pillow. And what I didn't realize was it sticks to the hair that's left on your head, which I apparently don't have anymore. So it doesn't come back, is what I learned. You know, so I'm past that point. I just made sense of it. So I'm going to end tonight with touching on a little bit of CONUS. CONUS is one of those systems that is being used more and more, especially on locator patients. We get so many patients with locators, 4 upper locators. They're miserable with it. It's not what they were promised. It's not what they thought it was going to be. And this system really helps us. So I got a little abbreviated version just to show you what it's about, but not get too deep into this. So one of the protocols, or one of the technologies that we've kind of lost, is the art of making a fixed detachable bar, clip bar. A lot of hardware in the patient's mouth, and a lot of issues with these casted bars. Dr. Jim Hoke is here tonight. Dr. Hoke, you probably remember this case. This was one of the first Hader bars I made coming to the US, and Dr. Hoke called me maybe a year later and said the ERA attachment broke off. The problem with these cases, if the bar fails, how do we recover? We start basically from scratch because the denture is obsolete. How do you do this? You go back to implant level impressions. So bars were eradicated when locators came out in about 2004. We didn't really see locators anymore, or we didn't see bars anymore. Today's technology is allowing us to cut these bars out of titanium. Now, if I can give you a bar like this that's strong and light, and I can put clips on there that you know, Hayter, Dolder, locator, side mounts, then we have a restorative option that you know is not going to break if you have those long distal extensions, which means you can support your denture better. Every design you can think of, we can create with this. We can do Montreal, we can do Dolder Hayter clips, doesn't matter what it is, even side-mounted clips in cases where you have reduced vertical. So some patients, this is still a good restorative option, and I think it's one of those things that we kind of forget that we have the ability to create these cases. The advantage we have right now is we can set our axial walls at 6 degrees. If we can take the pressure off the clips, then we don't have these issues long-term with maintaining the case as it goes on. Every time the locator clips wear out, patient comes back, you have to spend half an hour getting to that point to replace them. With something like this, we'll create the actual cobalt chrome to engage the axial walls of the bar, which means when you seat that case, everything is supported by the axial walls instead of the clips. I think where locators get sideways is people think it's retainment. Locators are designed to be support. And I think if you can stay away from using locators as a retainment clip and use it as a supporting clip, then it becomes a very good long-term option. A lot of these cases, the retention is so good that we'll process with the black processing housings because all it does is just hold the patient in place. So don't throw this out. It's a very, very good solution for patients where nothing else is working. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Conus. Conus was originally sold to us as 4 gold clips in a denture, patient goes home. Very easy, very simple. We've learned the hard way there's some small things we got to look at, and that's tissue compression. The same as when you reline locators in the mouth. When that patient closes too far down and the tissue pushes, they just lose retention. Friction fit, the advantage with friction fit is that it doesn't wear out. Matt was telling me the other day, we did a denture where the Syncone caps were 8 years old in the same denture, and he had better retention because they kind of settled down. Conus is like old shoes. The more those gold caps settles in, the better and more predictable the retention becomes. It's the opposite of what we used to because it's friction fit. The problem with the friction fit is the fact that you either have full engagement or you have no engagement. So when we seat these dentures and the patient bites down too hard and the tissue pushes out, you lose retention. So the only thing we pay attention to is that the denture is seated neutrally. And I think clinically that's the best advice I give you. So I'm going to run through how we do this and what it's about. So Conus has a Syncone cap. It's a gold cap. The first Syncone system was done 10 years ago. It's not a new system. Technology is allowing us to be more predictable. Then we have the Conus abutment, which is CAD designed. We can correct up to 30-degree angulation correction. So we have these patients, and remember, it's Atlantis, so almost any implant system works well with this. Then we have our prosthesis. We have a cementable frame, the gold cap, and the abutment. So basically a locator system, but a vertical retention. We'll talk about the advantage on that. And then we have a polymerization cap that helps us to pick these up. So what we got to remember with Conus is that it's a friction fit. So it helps us to get better retention over time. The abutment margin is about 1 millimeter off the tissue. So if we look at Conus around the implant sites, we need 15 millimeters, but only around the implant sites. What we did in the beginning to gain a little bit more clearance was cut the copings down and cut the abutment down. And what we didn't realize was a Conus abutment has a little millimeter clearance inside, and over time, as that coping settles down, the coping will seat further and further in the mouth, which means it doesn't wear, it gets better. So if you cut that top down, the abutment has nowhere to go, the coping can't expand, and the patient loses retention. So what I'm saying with that is you need 15 millimeters, and you can't get away with less. The advantage is it's only around the implant sites. Another big advantage with Conus is that AP spread does not influence the functional feel for a patient. And that's the one thing we've noticed. Flat or shallow AP spreads in the premaxilla, first molar occlusion, functions just as well as a retained spread, which is first molars and laterals, or first molars and cuspids. So these patients that show up that have odd spread in their mouth, Conus is ideal to transfer those patients. The advantage is Conus functions like a fixed hybrid. So when a patient bites on it, they can't sense any movement, and that's where the locator upgrade is great. So we take implant level impressions. We've done a few cases where we took digital impressions with this. First appointment, again, we have an implant level model. We make a bite rim. We do all our indexing of that like we do for normal dentures, set up the denture, and we reset that denture until the patient approves it, until the patient is happy with what we have. This now gives us the ability to dual scan the model and the denture, so we know exactly where the buccolingual parameters are and where we're going to place the abutments. And you can see on most of these cases, the spread is extremely shallow. It's all in the anterior maxilla. So we don't have to look at these cases by trying to place those implants back in the molar sites. We can put the copings on. We know exactly what we're going to deal with. We're helping our clinicians, especially with pilot rule guides, to make sure we get the implants as close as possible to parallel. If all the implants are going to face anterior, it's better to face in the same direction than get this. Now, when you read Conus can correct 30-degree angulation, people think, oh, I've got 30-degree angulation. I can correct all these abutments up to 30 degrees. The problem is the minute you start correcting this one, it eats up 28, 29, 27. So if you have implants like this, to correct this is more than 30 degrees. So if our surgeons places them like this, we can get them all in the same direction. So placing implants like that is never a good idea. With Conus, we have to be careful. We have to get them in the same direction so we can use that flare. So we got our Conus abutments ready to go. We did 5 on this case. 5 in most cases is a little bit too much retention. I think Dentsply suggests 5. What I've seen practically is 4 works great. Just enough retention for these patients. We make a cobalt chrome frame to transfer the stresses through the denture, and we try to make sure that the cobalt chrome sits on top of these implant abutments. So when the patient functions, we transfer the load down in. Atlantis makes a great positioning jig that helps you transfer these abutments to the mouth. So 2 things for a clinician. Don't compress the tissue, and make sure you get these abutments in the right position in the mouth. Because these are milled to 5-degree taper, if one of these abutments are out of position by 12 degrees or one slot on the hex, that 5-degree taper becomes a 20-degree undercut very quickly. So it's very important that if this positioning jig doesn't transfer to the mouth, you stop, take a new impression, we take a step back and we figure out where the problem is, making sure that the final delivery is always predictable. You can see the abutments in place. There's the Conus caps on top of it, and now we make a cementable frame. So what we've learned is if we can neutralize our tissue, make sure that we can index it in a neutral position, then we don't have any issues with retention later. So your third appointment, you get your 4 abutments, positioning jig, denture with tooth try-in still in wax, so you can make some small adjustments, cementable frame, and a new custom tray for final impression. So we're basically going to now eradicate our crown and bridge impression, and we're going to verify our model. So we go to the mouth, deliver our abutments, and because a lot of these cases are triangulated implant positioning, you can't put 4 abutments in one transfer jig and take them to the mouth because there'll be an undercut. So if you have a case like that, deliver the posterior ones first, then take the jig off, go back to the model, pick up the anterior ones, and then index them to the posterior ones. So basically delivering the 4 abutments in the right orientation to each other is crucial at this point because that will severely influence the retention. So our abutments are in place, and now we're ready to basically pick this up. Put our caps on. You put the cap on, take the back of a mirror, just tap them down, make sure those caps are engaged. From this point on, we put our polymerization caps on, and we are now going to cement our frame on top of that. So what we're doing is we're picking up the caps in the right position so the lab can pour a new model and create the final denture. Put a little cement in there, seat that down. Our tissue stops on this frame helps us to passively index where it needs to go. So basically, implant level impression, you get your abutments back, and now we're just going to pick up these caps in a new impression. So there's our cap. So once you pull this off, now you can test that everything is drawing. If one of these abutments were out of position, this is going to bind, and you're going to have to wiggle it out. Then you know something is wrong. It's very seldom that that happens. Now we go and we take an implant, new custom tray impression. At abutment, we're just going to lift these caps off. Once those caps are off, we go back to the lab and we pour a new model. So the patient now has these abutments in their mouth, old denture. We take the denture, put a little blue mousse in it, identify the positions of where these abutments are, little soft reline material. Patients love that denture. It's the best denture they've had in many years because of those. One thing we learned the hard way is don't take the abutments out of the mouth. Once we take the abutments out and something goes wrong with putting them back in, that's when we start spinning our wheels. So a few different variations of how we can do this. The one is cobalt chrome all the way into the palate. That's kind of the design we like. It keeps it very thin for the patients. The new design we're doing is acrylic all the way down into the palate. It's easier to reline those if something goes wrong later. And we have also our carbon flex, which means we can now mill these substructures. Instead of cobalt chrome, we can use a carbon flex material that actually has chemical and mechanical bonding. So our final delivery with this, you can see, we ended up going back to 4 abutments for this patient. Very shallow spread. Patient was extremely happy with the function. So even those cases that the spread is not good. So we had to get our patients a sleep denture. Initially what we did is we made a denture. We took 4 gold caps and created the denture twice. So your patient gets a final denture and they get a temporary denture. The problem with those gold caps are they're about $120 a piece. This is an economical system, so we're trying to keep things economical for the patients. So we created sleep dentures out of pure acrylic now. Because of these abutments being parallel, these prostheses slide over easily. We keep them high water design. Patients love it. So we're digitally archiving this. So if anything goes wrong after this point, we have the abutments in the mouth, patient lose their denture, how do we recover from that? When we archive this, we can go to our model printer and we can print the vertical position with the conus abutments out of our model system. We can go back, put our caps on, and your first new delivery will be a tooth try-in. So you don't have to go back, take implant level impressions and start the whole process over, because we're basically indexing this patient in our software. So as long as that patient lives, as long as that vertical doesn't change, we can come back and we can do that. So we're now also using that data to mill these dentures out of PMMA. So the patient lose their sleep denture, we can go back and re-mill one of those without having the patient having to come back for a new impression. It's extremely accurate. If you can look at this, you'll see that came straight out of the mill. It's an exact copy of what we had. Put it back on the articulator. So it tells you that we have the vertical stabilized and indexed in our data. So what we realized was these patients sometimes have a little too much retention. They can pull their Buicks in the backyard. And we found out that because we sometimes create vestibules, they can't get their fingers in like they do normally to get the denture out. So one patient had a needle, a niddling needle or whatever you call that. She stuck it in and she was pulling it. I said, well, that's a great idea. So we realized you have to give something to the patients to break that seal. When these copings seal up and there's a little moisture in, you get some really good retention, and that's what we're looking for. But you have to break that to get the patient to get the denture out. So we over festoon first bicuspid area just to give them an area to hook this in. So I'm going to admit something to you. I was in Home Depot one day, standing at the paint section, guy with the long hair and the tattoos are there, and I look down and I see this orange paint bucket. I'm like, what's those things? Paint can openers. And I'm thinking to myself, we can sell these for $55 a piece. I'm just going to put Absolute Dental on there. I got one of my artists to make a little tooth on there under the lathe, shine them up. Great option. So my buddy down at the beach calls me. He goes, yeah, those paint can openers, not working. I'm like, it's not paint can openers. Those are cast by European technicians right in the back. And he goes, no, buddy. Those things are made from tin, and tin rusts, and your paint can openers are rusting. What I didn't know, that I wasn't charging enough, because the back of a paint can opener is a bottle opener. So I was selling these patients for $55, a denture removal tool with a bottle opener. So if I could get away with the material, it would have been $75. We now go ahead and we actually cast these. But I want to show you this. And this is the first time this patient was using this to get the denture out. Now, he was quite a character, but listen to how this denture actually seals in the patient's mouth and the great retention we're getting from this. Oops.
Yeah, just send in the good ones.
Take 2.
There it is.
So the closest thing we have to a fixed option that is still removable without the bar is definitely one of these Konus systems. So I want to end tonight by saying thank you to all of you for joining us. About 2 years ago, I heard about this lady that was working for one of the previous presidents, the one on the left, and I thought, wow, if she can take care of a president, she can definitely take care of me. So the question always comes up, you know, am I just well taken care of or really spoiled? So I've got Trisha to the point where she knows exactly what I need to do my job. And tonight, I want to say thank you to Trisha. Trisha, where are you? I can't see you. I want you to come up here. These conferences is a huge effort. It takes so much work and dedication and planning to get to this. I remember last year or the year before, I was standing and I said, we'll never do this again. And now we have Trisha. So we'll do this as much or many times as you want us to because it's so much easier. She just tells us where to go. Trisha, I'd like to say thank you so much. You know, she's a loving person. She loves me. And I could never understand why she loves me. And she does that only when people are watching. But then I realized that the reason Trisha loves me is because I look just like her husband without the bunny ears. So I don't feel quite as special. I know I kind of look like him. But I want to say, you know, although sometimes I catch it with a plastic knife trying to cut my throat while I'm not watching, thank you so much. You did an exceptional job, I think, everybody here. And without you, this was not going to happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I am a little spoiled. What can I say? I'd like to, from all of us, Drew, myself, we've been here now for going on 18 years, say thank you for making us a part of this community. We're so proud to be a part of this. I've made so many good friends throughout the years. And thank you for supporting us every year with these conferences, for your support. You are the heart of our company. And I'd just like to say thank you so much. Have a great night.